Okay, so I talked a lot about reincarnation and how things work, the nature of God. So how do I know all these stuff? I definitely did not come up with it myself, I can tell you. Even though it'll be pretty nice, I just wake up one day and I dreamed of all this stuff by myself. But that's not how it works. I primarily track the research of University of Virginia on their past life regression study and their reincarnation study. University of Virginia is one of a dozen universities around the world that does these kind of research. I picked University of Virginia because their study is the ones that I tracked, and they're the oldest institution of its kind. So University of Virginia's medical school has the largest reincarnation center in the country. It's called the Department of Perceptive Studies. You can go onto their website and look at a lot of the materials that they accumulate. I want to just reference one study in which was given as support for the existence of reincarnation. Very rarely, when kids were very young, they remember what their previous life is. So the University of Virginia, they accumulate, they bring these kids in and they write down what their memories of their previous life is, and then they send out a team to go to these locations to find whether it's actually true or not. One of the famous cases involved a Thai boy, a boy from Thailand, who remembered that he used to be a soldier in the Thai army and he accidentally shot himself in the head, killing himself. So the bullet's supposed to go in here and come out on the top of his head. Now, if you're from the South or if you're familiar with guns, you will know that when you shoot a bullet through a body, the entry wound tend to be smaller than the exit wound, because the exit wound, the bullet will blast the flesh away. So for this study, they bring the boy from Thailand in and they studied it, and then they send out a team to literally dig open the grave of this dead guy to see whether the evidence match, and it does. The boy remember the bullet hole goes in through his lower chin, and the skull in the grave has a bullet hole going up the chin and coming out on the top of the head, and the wound on the top of the head is slightly bigger than the wound that's going in, suggesting the bullet is going this way. Now, there could be, there are many explanations of how the boy could potentially get that information. He could hear it from somewhere else, but overwhelming evidence suggests that it is a case of memory of the previous lifetime. Again, if you go on to University of Virginia's website, there are many other cases in which support very strong evidence that reincarnation is true. However, two problems comes with this. Number one, they can show evidence strongly suggesting reincarnation, but they do not have the scientific proof of why it would happen. For example, even though they can show you this is what happened, they don't know why exactly. They hired a few physicists recently and trying to go a step further in terms of figuring out how reincarnation can be done on a physical basis, but I do believe that we are decades away from the science of such. So as a result, they do not have substantial science backing their claims, and therefore they're being seen as pseudoscience. However, to me, the evidence seems to suggest that there's really very few alternatives other than the fact that we don't actually die when we die. We merely pass along to another realm before being reborn. Actually, evidence suggests that even when you die, there's no pause in consciousness. You are fully aware of what happened, except that you die. The second problem with University of Virginia, and I think this is even a bigger problem, is that a lot of these research are very dry and boring. I try to read some of it. I have a training in economics, so I understand statistics and when I read these research, it's just so dry that I have to bite myself not to fall asleep. And even though for scientists and doctors, they can read these studies and understand what happened, for a normal everyday human, unless you're really curious to know what happened, this is not stuff that you would want to read, and therefore people don't really care about it very much. So that's why this is still somewhat of an esoteric knowledge in the sphere. If you think these scientific research are boring, there is a popular book that talk about past life regression and how things work. It's called, the author is called Brian Weiss. He's a Columbia graduated MD who happened to stumble upon reincarnation through hypnosis regression therapy. He's actually the doctor who gives these therapies. He wrote several books. One of them, which I read when I was very young, is called Many Lives, Many Masters. It's a very easy read, and it gives you a pretty good background understanding of how things work. So what would all these reincarnation mean for the greater world? I think right now the timing is still not quite right. There's not enough people actually know about this. But I do think in the long run, it could result in a better world. In economics, we learned that people behave according to incentives. And right now, we're assuming that the incentive that people behave in is purely self-centric, in which you behave in a way that best serves yourself. However, if the knowledge becomes commonly accepted that we do not die, but we reincarnate into another body, and it could be very well that when you reincarnate into the bottom, 20% of the human population. It gives many people the incentive to make this a better world. And I really think that it could be the answer in the long term to how human beings get to come and work together and build a better future. Because if you know that you don't just leave this world behind, but very likely you will come back, then hopefully, maybe I'm just a idealistic liberal, but hopefully that will make people get together and work together. And technically, if you think about it, you do the right thing. You be kind to other people. You're not supposed to do it looking for reward. Being kind to other human beings is its own reward. So technically speaking, having the knowledge of reincarnation should not actually change your behavior. This is why the Jews don't, let you study the Kabbalah until you're 40. They don't want the knowledge of reincarnation change your behavior in the existing world. However, we're living in a world full of shallow people. We live in a world that's full of people who are still in the process of going through the reincarnation cycle. So I do think that even though you're not supposed to be nice to other people for your own reward, having the knowledge that we do come back, in other lifetimes, could just provide a marginal incentive to have people work together and create a better future.